Hello and happy Infamy Day to you, Scott Baker.
I mean, it is because it is December 7th, but in you're fresh from a trip to Hawaii. So was this
I'm
extra on your mind?
I'm here today. The
Mm-hmm.
original Infamy Day, December 7th,
Mm-hmm.
was on a Sunday as well. So I'm
Yeah.
here
Oh,
on
how about that?
Sunday morning my time, afternoon for you. And so
Right.
there was time for pause to
Hmm.
reflect on whether or not Infamy Day did this day actually go down in infamy the way that uh, Americans thought that it might back in the early 40s, right? Now,
Mm-hmm.
more than 80 years later, we are allies with the folks that
Yep.
made this day infamous for us, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it just feels like it's just completely different. It just feels like the projection that we made when we called this day going down in infamy is not the projection that all of us had.
Well, you would always want a better version of the future and a different realignment of the world. And
Right.
so the infamy may have been a short term horizon of the burden and the pain and the suffering to come over the next years as the
Yes.
expansion of the war became even more global at that point. So it's look, it's certainly not the topic of the field note that we're here to talk about on Lead Better, but in all things, we look at leadership decisions and moments, and we respond to things that happen in the world, whether they be acts of war, market forces, personal tragedies, all kinds of things can lead. And in a way, you look for those moments where people. It is the unexpected moment, and when people of character are built in a certain way, they may be ready for that moment. So
Right.
I think there's and that does actually kind of come to the theme of the field note today.
It absolutely does. Like those words were spoken by an American leader who,
Hmm.
we're talking today specifically about
Hmm.
phraseology and like your
Yep.
belief statements and and how they come out of your mouth and exactly why they
Hmm.
might work for you and why they don't. And so
Yeah.
the most famous words ever spoken on this particular day was a leader trying to
Hmm.
get people to wrap their minds around a certain direction.
Sure. Yeah. Well, and those things and those moments and one of my closest lifelong friends was a chief speechwriter at the White House for a long time, and had to write phrases like that in times of great tragedy, and so a lot of thought goes into those things, at least in careful administrations, and certainly we can look back and kind of fact check and vibe check the presidents of the past. So I think the question when we look at the field note, which is field note number 1641, and thank you to all of you tuning in here for Lead Better. If you're watching live on a Sunday afternoon, welcome. That's what we love, folks that love to talk about leadership. And since we do the field notes every single day of the week and have for 4.5 years, hi to all of you in 185 or so countries and 100,000 plus of you that get the field notes. So we're glad to have you in the family. This one introduces a phrase. I don't think the concept is necessarily news, but the phrase I like, which is belief because statements. And it comes from a book by Brian Gottlieb, who is a CEO and had a book called Beyond the Hammer. And a couple of years ago, it was out. And so this ties to some things that we do teach in admired leadership, and particularly in some of our playbook behaviors. But this idea of a leader who, as the headline says, good leaders explain the logic behind their everyday beliefs. There's just certain ways they go about doing what they do. And sometimes leaders are very aware of this idea that, like, in a pivotal moment, I need to give you the reasons for why I made this decision. But there's a real power in just having a day-to-day cadence of them doing this, and here's why. We're going to look at this, and here's why. Here's the approach, and here's how we react to this, and here's why. And that makes a lot of sense.
When my children were quite young, I began to realize that when we were driving in the car, my wife in the co-pilot seat, because back then I was driving and she, right?
This is a long story, by the way.
That's a long story, but mom and dad in the front compartment oftentimes have the choice of whether or not they're going to throw back their communication to the kids in the back seat.
Yeah, right.
And just me choosing to project to them, what's ahead in the future in the next 15, 30, 45 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
we lived out in the desert, and so everything was 45 minutes away, right? But
Mm-hmm.
giving them an expectation in their head, it seemed like, well, of course you do that. Of course you
Mm-hmm.
communicate with your kids where you're going, what you're doing. But there were times as a dad when you have like 7 things in a row
Mm-hmm.
where you're getting in the car and you're going to the next chore, but oh, I'm changing the order. So I'm not communicating that to the people who are just, writing on sketch pads and doodling in
Mm-hmm.
the back seat. Why do I really need to communicate? Yes. I learned you do need to communicate
Yeah.
that, right?
Yeah.
So for me, that was the hallmark for me. It wasn't like turn these into belief because statements, because I love that direction. But
Mm-hmm.
just the idea of saying a leader needs to communicate to his people when you're redirecting, when you think that there's no context where it matters to those that are down the line
Mm-hmm.
for me, just choosing to communicate better, right? So having something like this in your hip pocket that says, I'm going to communicate it, I'm going to communicate it
Sure.
quickly, and probably throwing out a belief because statement in this moment is probably the most practical thing to do.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm sure that worked, particularly on the drive, like back to your house in the desert, where you were saying, and we live in the desert because that's where Dad can better hear the aliens that talk to him all of the time.
Yes.
So it's just
Right.
good to kind of explain to the kids, where where things stand. Now we do have a couple of more real world example statements in the field note that would be examples, and the first one kind of goes dangerous right to politics. This is my preferred candidate because their skills match the role perfectly, right? So it would be good for parents, whether they're talking about, character issues, political issues, religious issues, whatever it may be, societal conflicts, to be like, well, I tend to see it this way and here's why, right? Not just, well, we're a this family, right? And so, you can't, I think maybe in a way, the field note ultimately in the end is just saying, you need more than a bumper sticker.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And we've had things in our family where the rationale for the type of family we are has changed. Like we used to be a racetrack family.
Mm-hmm.
Now we are a QT family, right?
Mm.
So don't go to racetrack anymore. We go to QT, and we know why. It's because the Dr. Pepper syrup ratio is much better at QT than any other gas station in the area.
Well, okay. Now, first of all, when you started with the racetrack and that, I wasn't even sure what that meant because those aren't present in my
Well,
region of the country,
yeah.
but I have seen them before. So it took me a half a second to kind of get dialed in, but now I'm there. So that's a very important distinction between those particular places. It also indicates a lot about just again, Dad's odd behavior to research the syrup content in the Dr. Pepper at convenience stores.
Yeah,
So again, we'll do that on another podcast. So let me rattle through a couple of these. We should pause the project because the risk assessment shows a probability of failure. We must enter the mid-market segment because our customer research shows unmet demand here. I propose that we prioritize this project because it delivers the highest profit margin. It's like where you're seeing, and all of these where you're seeing a strategy, you're seeing some numbers, you're seeing something on the spreadsheet that's popped out to you. And again, it may not be the thing where it's necessarily major. Some of these are kind of key, but it's sort of that day to day. And the thing that really struck me as I was reading this is, I suppose leaders, it's a thing to say, whether you're a parent or a leader, you should be explaining your everyday beliefs. But I was reading it actually from the other end of being like, anytime I've been around a leader that I really wanted to learn from, this is what I wanted.
Right.
I actually wanted them to be explaining these things. And I was thinking about it last night. I was with a gathering and there were a couple of people that are very knowledgeable. And there were people that were kind of giving their opinions about certain things and some reasons. And there was one particular person who probably had the most authority of anyone in the room around a certain area. And they actually just seemed kind of hesitant to explain, their feelings around certain things. And I kind of was like, I sort of want you to step up here. Like, I'm actually looking for a little bit of insight. So I think your people, your kids, whoever, those on your team, they are looking for some insight here.
They are. And I think most people are looking for rationale. They're looking for other reasons to jump on board. And that rationale is, so there's a bit of a risk there because if you don't have a clear rationale, if you don't really have a preference that actually sounds good, that's data driven and not just personal preference driven, it's going to expose yourself, right? The people who are going to be resistant to this technique the most are probably the people who just don't have a good rationale and they know it.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting in the rationale of the field note itself. It's kind of saying that one of the reasons that a leader does this is not only just to explain, but that in the cadence of explaining, which is kind of people like us do things like this. This is how we go about the everyday beliefs part. That people do like to actually repeat these things. You want them to become part of the language and internalized phraseology that your people have, and that's actually one of the biggest gifts you can give to your team. If you've spent however much chunk of your life becoming sort of seasoned and a veteran and bringing wise judgment to these things, well, then where it doesn't, you don't want it to end with you, right? You want your people to be saying 20 years later, I remember when my boss said this and it always stuck with me because he always said it, right? Or whatever it was. And I think that's a great thing to aspire to be saying, well, what are the things? Even though, to say, well, let me sit down and think about this, because some things might be about value, some things might be about process, some things might be particular about the area of expertise in our business. But, we probably do this a little less often than we should. And I actually heard an old podcast that somebody had sent me with an Irish poet, John O'Donohue, and he was saying that he often would advise people to write down, what are the 7 sentences that you would say, these are the 7 things that I really believe, right? And then he also said, write down 7 sentences that you would be like, I've never even flirted with these ideas, but they might be pretty good, right? I need to think about these. But I was like, that's probably true. Probably most people haven't thought about those 7. But if you're a leader and you say, these are the things that these are my go-tos. These are the core of who I am about what we do.
Well, I don't think
could you articulate them like that?
I don't think you're trying to necessarily make a distinction between what the core beliefs are and what are, but there is a word here at the end of these examples that brings up a question for me. Like, according to Gottlieb, good leaders use belief because statements to communicate transferable beliefs. In my mind, that's like, what is a non-transferable belief? Is that what we're
it is? No, that's a good question. I mean, obviously, it's something that you think that other people in your team and your organization should adopt, like you would, and can adopt, right? Yes. There's a little bit of a universality to them. It's not like you have a certain characteristic, like I'm a morning person. Everybody on this team must be a morning person. Like maybe they're not.
But is this a coded way of saying don't talk about religion and politics?
No. In fact, I don't even think so much. I mean, you can decide in a particular workplace what the atmosphere is there. I think this is more about the connectivity issue, which is the belief and the because. So it's more about this pattern of, it's not that I can't, that I shouldn't talk about this topic, but it's when I'm going to talk about this topic, I'm going to connect it to the because. Now, good leaders know it's like you're not there to say, like, this is how I feel about Division II basketball. Like, I mean, there's no point. There needs to be some relevance to what the team is working on that would even make that make that relevant. I think you're a longtime social media guy. It's kind of like this because part strikes me as, I don't know when it started in social media, but this idea of, are you bringing the receipts? Right? You see that phrase pop up. I think this, here are the receipts. Or here's I know that this happened, here are the receipts. And so I think this is just saying, let me bring some of the logic to what I'm advocating for.
Right. Certainly some of the most usable bromides that we might think of, like just things that might feel like colloquial phrases, like when they're positioned in belief because statements, they probably become more powerful. Probably the most powerful one,
right? Have
these belief because statements hidden inside of them already.
Yeah, for sure. And so there is in any persuasive advocacy moment, there should be a logic to what you're presenting, how you're getting someone's attention, how you're creating a felt need around some question that they might be asking. You're going to make your case. You've got to kind of make it, logical. And so that's for sure. I think that the rhythm of this one, and I'd like to actually go, I've never read this book. Like I hadn't even heard of it, and probably Randall has come across it. He gets through a tremendous number of the books that are out there on business and leadership. And then we actually put, for our subscribers, we do weekly, book summaries for folks that are kind of unique, right? They just kind of break things down into, specific sets of 3 of takeaways and ideas and things that you can apply from all current books and classic books. Just one side benefit that people get that are actual clients of our playbook online platform, but I'm sure there's a lot of depth in this book with this guy who was a unique kind of CEO who took kind of a smaller operation from my just very peripheral knowledge and built it into a very large organization. And you can't do that if you're not creating real connectivity and glue among the people that are in your stores, in your operation, and where that becomes just a sense of a true shared sense of, yes, the mission and the vision, but what is the day-to-day way that we go about doing things? How do we think about customers? How do we think about, how we take care of our workplace and our, what do we show the people that walk through our front door? All of the little pieces of that, and it's just kind of like, we heard the one woman speak at one of our events in Arizona where she had a bunch of restaurants, but for her, when she's walking up to visit one of her restaurants, if she sees smudges on the window or if she sees, the handles on the doors, and she's going to just go in, she's not going to make a huge deal. She's going to grab a spray bottle and a rag and she's going to start cleaning.
Right. And
if they say
to create a belief because statement around that thing that annoys her, right, that aggravates her, is probably not, it's like she needs to spend time with it because the thing that comes out of her mouth in that moment shouldn't be snide. It should actually
right.
kind of
Here's why. Yeah. Yep. And I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, people saw it last night, with Indiana beating Ohio State. I don't follow college football that closely, but I did read the long profile in the New York Times about Chip Gannetti. No, it's a longer name than that. Sorry, the coach of Indiana, because he spent some time here in Pittsburgh. And what was the secret? The same. Right. That was the exact quote from the article, which is, we're going to find this way to do this. Here's how we do it. I'm elevating. We're going to do it. 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 And he's always telling them why.
Yeah. Right. Excellent. Well, I think you and I could talk about this for a lot longer because there's a marketing aspect here that says, well, should these statements actually not appeal to your logic, but to your heart and your feelings, right? Should you actually phrase it? And are those 2 different statements? Is the because part of belief not something that most marketers would use, right? Unless your because also has some kind of feeling. So anyway, but that has to be a discussion for some time later.
I think if it's going to last, you have to feel it.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a great way to wrap this up. All right.
Thanks Mike.
For your time today. Bye now.
See you.